Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm joined today by Joann Arce. Joann, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. Well, this is an exciting call because this is part of a two-part series on vaccination. So, Joann, to start off with, we'd like to know just a little bit more about you. So can you tell us just a quick bio, a little bit of information about you personally?
Great. So I'm Joann Arce. I am a mom of two. I have two kids. One is 2 years old and the other is 5 years old. I am originally from the Philippines. I graduated with my PhD in molecular biology and microbiology in Brigham Young University. Currently, I'm a research fellow in infectious diseases at Boston Children's Hospital and also at pediatrics at Harvard Medical School.
Wow. Okay. So that is a super impressive, education. I love it. I think we're going to learn a lot from you. So to start off with, what interested you in vaccines? So you said you studied molecular biology and microbiology. Was that the other one?
Exactly.
Okay. And what got you really interested in the whole idea of vaccines?
So again, I started learning about vaccination even before I started in my undergrad. And during that time, I was just appalled, coming from a third world country. We know that vaccination is already a part of life. We have to get it. I do have some people that I know of, family members who got diseases, infectious diseases, because they're not vaccinated or because they were exposed to those kind of infectious diseases. So it has been a part of my life. And then when I started studying, it really made me interested on it because of a lot of backgrounds that I've found it, and also being able to take immunology as a class. So yes.
Yeah. So, okay, that's really interesting. So you said you have to get it. In the Philippines, are vaccinations mandatory?
Well, I guess I can say that it is a part of the expanded programs of immunization, or EPI, which you can say really not mandatory, but it's scheduled, so it's required. So I guess you can say it that way. But then we don't have a lot of resources, unlike here in the US.
Okay. Interesting. So another thing I want to unpack a little bit there that you mentioned, you said you have seen people or known people with some of these diseases. Can you tell us? So you've like people that you know personally have gotten some disease, vaccine preventable. Is that what they call them? Vaccine preventable
Yes.
diseases?
I should not say only know people, but I myself actually got those diseases growing up. So when I was on my sixth grade, I got mumps.
Okay.
So from then I got mumps. I know a lot of people, even family members, that had tuberculosis. I myself got chicken pox. I know some people who got polio. So it is a part of our life. But then I realized, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I don't know, like a lot of people know if people got mumps, like what happens to them. But I remember myself growing up that I have to miss a whole finals exam because of mumps. And it was really swollen. I had fever for how many days. I have to stay home because it cannot be. I'm pretty sure nobody wants mumps too, especially if they don't have vaccines for mumps. And during that time, I just realized that I didn't get it too, because it's not readily available to us. So I know a lot of people who had German measles or rubella, that they have to be aware of that, even especially if they're pregnant. I know some people who had measles that has to be away from those people who had newborns because they have to protect those newborns. So yeah, it's really a hard experience for me to start.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really interesting background to have experienced these diseases. Now, obviously, these diseases aren't pleasant, right? It's not fun to have the mumps. Chicken pox. I also had chicken pox. That was before the vaccine. That's just
Right.
because
Yeah.
that came out later. But I'm really, I think that people researching this, moms who are trying to figure out what they should do and moms who have maybe decided against it would say, okay, but here's Joann and she had the mumps and yeah, it stinks and she had to miss finals and whatever, but she's okay. What would you say to that?
Well, it's okay, but you don't know the consequences of those people who had immune compromised. If they're immune compromised, you don't know what's going to happen to them. And it can be debilitating to them, it can be deadly, even. So that's the main reason why, one of the reasons actually, on why we vaccinate is not only for us to be protected against these infectious diseases, but also to protect others to not get them, especially if they don't have the perfect immune system that you probably have.
Okay, so that makes sense. So part of vaccinating is for us and part is for others, but it's that two-part thing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, as you've researched and both lived some of these diseases and seen them and then gone on to do the research, what have you found that convinced you that vaccinating is important?
That's really a great question. And it's very important. Again, we believe in evidence based science. A lot of the research has been done. For me, myself, I'm a researcher. I'm a bench scientist as well as a systems immunologist, in which I see them firsthand. For example, I can learn from a lot of this through experimentation, through building hypothesis, testing it myself, and confirming if it works or not. So, why vaccination is important, as we know that a part of the immunology, and immunology is still a growing. This is still a growing science. You probably think that everything is figured out in the world, and that's what we're hoping for, but it's not. We turn to learn, especially for vaccinations, that the vaccination is the effects of vaccines to children or to everyone is different based on age, based on sex, based on where you come from your microbiome, from the environment you are in. And as you know, coming from me myself as a vaccine scientist, I can say that vaccines or vaccination is not one size fits all. But then I can say that we are still learning more about it. But I can also say that vaccines, although it's not one size fits all, the benefits outweighs the risk. And that's why it's very
Okay.
important.
So, as you've researched these vaccines, that's the conclusion you've come to is that the benefits outweigh the risk, and I think that that's a really, valid point because I think that that's what we all have to figure out as moms. I mean, it is weighing the benefits and weighing the risks, right? That's what we're all trying to do. Like, okay, how do we figure out what to do? Well, we have to look at the benefits, we have to look at the risks. So, any, specific research or anything that you've seen that really has convinced you that it is on that the benefits do outweigh the risks, like getting more into specifics and kind of, um, I feel like, let me back up a little here. I feel like we see in the news or on our Facebook feed or whatever, a lot of a lot of fear stories. And this is kind of from the anti-vaccine camp, right? We see like, oh my gosh, this kid got vaccinated and this happened and they had this horrible reaction or death or whatever. And then so the question then is like what kind of sways us the other way, because what shows us that the benefit outweighs the risk?
So, Chanel, replying to that, I guess the main important thing is as you hear those stories, is how can we validate that it's because of a vaccine? Similar
Yeah.
to what I said, that there's a lot of factors for vaccine to work. There's also factors that we have to understand why it's actually happening to the baby or why it's happening to a child. And that is, we don't have a definite answer for sure, but we have to understand first how the immune system works. And when you talk about immune system, it's not just a very easy to explain, right? But for moms to understand, that's why you have to, this is probably a great way to tell the moms that don't be afraid to ask your pediatrician. If you are not comfortable or vaccination, or if your pediatricians are requiring you to get vaccinations, ask them why. Ask them some of them are saying go get the inserts, and I advocate for that. Go get the inserts so that you will be aware of that. However, you have to make sure that the research you're doing is a credible research. And how do you get credible research is by learning immunology. And this is, I guess, what I can say.
Okay. That's good. And I think that that's all important stuff. I really like that you pointed out, how can we validate that it's from the vaccine? Because I think that that's where it gets really confusing as a parent, because even these stories you hear, you don't know, is it because of the vaccine? Is it not? And there's just so much questioning that goes on. And so it really makes you wonder. So I like that. Credible research is definitely where you need to go and to really understand how this works. So what kind of things would you tell moms then as they make this decision? We aren't all like you, Joann. We aren't all molecular biologists and scientists and all this. So how do we on a basic level learn immunology? How do we get the information and learn enough about how the immune system works, and enough about the benefits, enough about the risks, that we can make this decision?
I've sometimes, there's a trust factor too. Trust factor to know like where or why we vaccinate. And I've been like, just scrolling up at different blogs saying that vaccines are created so that, it's a conspiracy or something like that. Maybe they can also think that there are moms like me behind those scenes that won't do this because I love my children. And as I see how many people are actually dying of infectious diseases, last month I gave a talk in Precision Vaccines Conference. And one of the things that I was able to say in the talk is that about 2.8 million children die during the first month of life in 2016. And that's about 7,000 newborn deaths every day.
Wow.
And this usually occurs during the first week of life. And many of this are still caused by infections. Many of this can be vaccine preventable.
And you're talking about other people getting vaccines so that those diseases aren't spread to newborns, not the newborns themselves. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. And what I can actually, what I can give as advice to the moms is just like what I said before, is to ask, don't be afraid to ask, but don't just jump into conclusions, because we cannot always, say the symptom is caused by a vaccine. We have to look at all the different facets. And maybe it's, this is something that we're also aware as scientists, not only about how effective the vaccine can be, but also how safe the vaccine can be. And that's why the research that I'm currently doing is heading towards this. I'm just going to share my research all about. I'm actually doing more on systems biology or systems vaccinology, in which we're looking at different things that happens after vaccination. For example, what happens to the genes after vaccination? What happens to the proteins after vaccination? What happens to your antibody after vaccination? And now, because of the recent advancement in science, I think this is something that will help the community learn more, and also ways like to learn more about how the vaccine can actually help more of the people, but also how we can gauge more on the safety of the vaccines. So, yeah, like for me, don't be afraid to ask, but also don't look for not credible sources. Make sure that you're looking at credible sources. And how can we figure that out? I know a lot of people doesn't like CDC, but CDC is one of those sources that you can find, because this, again, these are evidence-based science. We also have WHO with this information about vaccines. We also have the National Institutes of Health looking at this area of vaccination.
Okay, so I will link to those. So the CDC, WHO, and the National Institute of Health are some good, credible resources there. Now, tell us a little bit more about, can you tell us anything you found in your research? Because those are really interesting questions to kind of understand what happens to the body after vaccination. Have you come to any conclusions yet in your research, or it's still in the early stages?
We just started what we call a Human Immunology Project Consortium, where in this project that we're doing, we're specifically looking at, our group is specifically looking at newborns. Some of the groups are looking at adults, especially the influenza virus or influenza vaccination. Some of the groups are looking for dengue and Zika virus or other infections. But our group is specifically looking what happens to a newborn after vaccination in the first week of life. We are actually in a preliminary stage. This is a 5-year project. We're just in year 1. But what we have really found is that the risk to suffer from infection drastically changes with age. And newborn, or the neonatal period, or the first 28 days of life, is the most vulnerable time for a child's survival. And they have very distinct immunity that are very different from adults. And not only that, we have to understand that because of their newborn impaired response to immunity, that's why they have different response to vaccination. Not only that, there's a lot of other factors that we have to understand. Again, it's age dependent. It can be sex dependent. There are a lot of factors.
Wow. Okay, that is super interesting. That's exciting work that you're doing. I'm super glad that you are telling us about that. Now, you say that newborn is the most vulnerable time. What I've heard in the anti-vaccine camp is okay, and I would love to hear from your perspective the opposite side of this. But I've read this and I've heard this, and in a way it made sense to me. So I'd love for you to unpack this. And what I've heard is this, that if, say, a mom, so say you've had mumps, and then you now, because you've had mumps, build up a natural immunity to mumps, because that's how the body works, right? Like, I think I'll go on with this. You can correct anything I say wrong in here. So then you have a baby, and that baby gets some of your immunity, both through, in utero, and then as you breastfeed and all these things. Your newborn, during that vulnerable time you're talking about, is protected because of your immunity. And then later they could go on and get mumps, or later they could be protected through your immunity. Now, is that just some crazy far-fetched thing, or is there some truth to that?
That's really great that you brought that up. And what I can say is that maternal immunity, in terms of the transfer of the antibodies to newborn, is still currently in the infancy. The question that you're saying is that, for example, if mumps happen, But you know what? I can't really say this is correct until we see evidence of it, right?
Okay.
And also, there's a lot of factors that are involved to that. And, this is an area that some groups are looking on. That's why there's the maternal immunization, because there's probably a greater chance that they can pass through those antibodies to the young ones. But then again, as what I said, these newborns they have premature immunity. They are very different from adults. And some of them have waning immunity also early in life. So that's why there's different kinds of boost of vaccinations that you perform. Not only one-time vaccination, but there's some of them, they are, 3 doses of vaccination because of that waning immunity. Not only
Right.
that, some of the people also have different baseline of protection. And we have to be aware of that not one person is similar with how the other person is happening. So this is why we are aware of this consequences that, the vaccination is really a complex area, a complicated area, but we have to look at all the facets of it. And I do agree that there is a portion of the maternal that is transferred to the mom. As you know, that nutrition is similar to that in some sense. But then we have to understand to what are those? And is it still dependent on one type of infectious disease? Is it because of the cells, or like the genetic components of that? And there's still not a stamp of approval to everything. So
So,
again, research is warranted in this area.
okay. So basically, what I think I'm hearing you say here is it could, that could happen, but we're not sure enough. So you would say to be safe, you would go ahead and vaccinate. Is that
Oh,
kind of where you're
definitely.
going?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Because you're not sure, like the maternal immunity might be passed on, but it might not, or it'll last for a little while, but not long enough.
Exactly. And
Okay.
also, again, a newborn is a different entity already. And just like
Right.
what I said, the immunity or the immune system of your baby is different from you. And
Yeah.
again, it's also just like what I mentioned a while ago, their immune system is still developing and they're distinct from the adults. So that's why we vaccinate. We train their immune system so that they can be protected against the antigens that might not be, that may prevent them from being protected.
Okay. That totally makes sense. So as I'm listening to you, I can see how there is so much confusion out there about vaccination. I can see how people don't who do want to vaccinate their kids, but they're too young to get those vaccines, how they can get angry at the people who choose not to vaccinate because what you said at the beginning, we're vaccinating for us, yes, but we're also vaccinating for others. So it kind of has shed a new light for me on why there's so much anger because some of if you're pro vaccine and if you understand how vaccines work, then some of this is a kind of trust in the system and trust other people kind of program. And if they don't do it, then it's a problem.
Exactly. And I think that's where we're all coming from because we have different opinions. We can't push someone's opinion to others, right? We have that ability to choose for us. And, we totally respect their opinions. But for us as scientists and as medical professionals, we are informing what happens after vaccination or what happens if you don't vaccinate. We are informing the majority about infectious diseases. We're informing the people about death that occurs in the early weeks of life. And that is the limit that we can have. And it is a responsibility of everyone to decide for themselves. but also it's a responsibility to be informed and also to look at credible resources.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's some good thoughts. In the last little bit of time we have left, I would love for you to just share any final words that you would have for, say, a friend who came to you and said, Joann, I'm just, not sure. I've done some research and I could go either way. I kind of, I see the arguments for vaccinating, but I see how it would be good not to vaccinate. What would you say to that friend?
I'm not just basing from history, but also from science, from what we have seen through research, that vaccination is safe and effective, that before a vaccine is out in the market, there's a careful long review. There's a lot of research behind that first to make sure of its effectiveness, but also of its safety. And we're not discounting still, but there might be side effects after vaccination, maybe allergic reaction, but they are very rare. Just like what I said, the benefits of the vaccines is much, much greater than the side effects for all children. But then the research is warranted so that we can have more trust in this, in which that's why we're looking at all the areas so that we can predict the effectiveness of the vaccines early on, and also that we can predict the safety of the vaccines. But also, you need to immunize, or you have to make sure that you learn about immunization, that it's not only protecting yourself, but also it's also protecting those people that you love. Not only that, is that there's also that community or the majority of people that cannot be vaccinated.
Yeah.
They are immune compromised. They have conditions such as cancer or other things. For the adults, they can't, not all of them can be immunized. And that's why if you're vaccinated yourself, this will help prevent those diseases to your loved ones. And yeah, that's one more thing. And also, vaccines is one of those intervention that happens in the past, how many decades, that is very helpful because it actually can save you time and money. Being away from school because you are getting those diseases, it can really help you a lot if you're vaccinated so that you're not having those diseases yourself.
Definitely. Well, I am so glad that there are people out there like you that you're doing this research because I think, as you pointed out, the more that we know, the better off that we are. The more knowledge we have as parents, the better we can do at making these decisions. And the more information that's out there because of the research that's going on, then we're just going to have better and better information and be able to make better decisions. So it's awesome what you're doing. I think that, your research is very interesting and I am excited to hear, as the project goes on, to continue learning more about your findings and what you guys do. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I just want to say, it doesn't stop. We can always complain about a lot of these things, but it will be better if we're just cooperating and helping the community learn more. And we just like what I said, if you have questions, look at credible sources. Look at both sides of the spectrum because, for me, myself, when I look at different blogs, when I look at different websites, I'm also looking at them and looking at their questions so that I can formulate those questions into my research. And I can also look at the other side of the spectra.
Yeah. And the more I mean, the better you can do, the better decision you can make. So that's good advice. Well, I think you've given us some great both places to go to get more information and some great food for thought of what we can really, what we need to think about when it comes to vaccines. So Everyone, I wish you the best of luck. This is a big decision. And Joann, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Moms Who Know. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. A special thank you to those of you who have reached out, those who have shared the show, the people who have recommended guests, and those who have left reviews on iTunes. I just want you to know I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad that we are building a community and that you are a part of it. At this time of year, things get really busy, so I wanted to remind you to get online and get your copy of Real Food Fast from Tiffany at Don't Waste the Crumbs. She will help you save money and make the dinner process go a lot smoother. To get that, you're going to go to grocerybudgetbootcamp.com/moms who know.